It's Joan Jack, and I'm coming to you live from the Alaska Highway just outside of Whitehorse, Yukon. So tonight is part 4 of my series of rants about the fact that there's no democracy in Indian country. I'm basically just taking the opportunity to speak my mind. Look at my gray hair. I love my gray hair, but just all frizzy. Well, I guess first I should say I'm probably going to offend some people for sure, but that's not my intention. And, you know, if you're offended, I'm sorry you feel that way. But yeah, I don't know what to say. So tonight I wanted to talk about how, in my experience, it seems that it's occurred to me lately are the people who are working for Indigenous or First Nation governments, First Nation Indian Act governments, civil servants? Do they see themselves as some civil servants? Like people who work for the federal government, the provincial government, municipalities and the bureaucracies, they are all civil servants because their jobs are paid for by taxpayers' money. So in our case, the money that is paid to the people who work in our bureaucracies comes from Indian Affairs, and we are all counted. There are typically per capita formulas, and there's a lot of trouble because a lot of off-reserve people believe that they're counted in the per capita formula, but they don't get any services off-reserve. So I think that in some areas when we live off-reserve, we are counted, like, for example, education, post-secondary education, really. But in other areas like housing, and well, actually, there is not even any money for housing anymore. It's all through CMHC. There's no more, like in the old days, there used to be so much per registered Indian on reserve allotted for each house, but that's long gone. Anyways, like I said, these are rambles, so I'm just going with my thought process here. And what really bothers me is that when I used to work in the First Nation bureaucracies, if members came into me and said, gee, we'd like to do XYZ, I wouldn't say to them, oh, I'm sorry, we don't get funding for XYZ. I would say, wow, that sounds like a really good idea. I'll write that up and we'll go over it. And then let's see if we can find some money somehow, and maybe we won't, but let's try. And so I always saw it as my job to meet the needs of the people and try to get what the people identify as their needs. But mostly what we have in Indian country are people who are simply just administering the program funding that comes from Indian Affairs or First Nations Indian Health Branch or other federal government sources of funding, and they just are basically serving the needs of the program funder. And some people who work for our governments actually say that and don't even feel bad about saying that. They say, no, that's not funded, sorry. Or maybe they don't even say sorry. They just say that's not funded. And so then people are left feeling really mad and really, really not served. So yeah, I don't feel like my share is that powerful tonight because I'm tired, but the point I'm making is a really important one. My view is that if you work for a First Nations government, your primary job is to find the money that the people need to do what they want to do. Because sure as heck, the funding that we get from the federal government in any of the departments is not there to meet our needs. It's there to meet the legal obligations as they're defined by that government so that they reduce their risk and liability so that we don't sue them. It's just all about money and risk management. Whereas people will come in and say, gee, I wish we had a log house program, or I wish we had, I don't know, whatever they wish they had. And then the bureaucrats in Indian country need to say, that is so cool. Let's see what we can do to find that. Let's see what we can do to find that for you. Maybe we won't. Let's see what we can do to generate that revenue ourselves. So I don't know if any of that resonated with you, but I am so sick and tired of being told by our own people in those jobs rudely, no, that's not covered. And, I think that's the other thing. I'm not talking about any particular First Nation or any particular person, but the delivery of the no is something that you should stop enjoying, because the delivery of the no is really the agenda of the federal government or the provincial government, and that's not our people's goal. So if you have to deliver a no, you should at least deliver it kindly and respectfully and say, well, we'll see what we can do. I'll try to look into that for you, or I'll bring it up with leadership. And yeah, I just think it's really important that people understand what the heck they're doing there, and they're there to serve the people. They're not there to just take a paycheck home and fulfill the needs of the federal and provincial governments. The other thing I want to say in closing, this is kind of an explosive one, about confidentiality of salaries. There's all kinds of hiding. Well, what do they make then? How much are they earning? And you know, in most of the federal and provincial governments, there's standards. When somebody earns a certain amount of money and over, it's public disclosure, because they can't hide behind confidentiality, because those are taxpayers' dollars. And I think that's something that should start happening in Indian country too, because if what people made was more evident, then maybe they'd do a better job. Sorry if I'm pissing you off, but it's just the way it is. There's so many people in our communities that are the wrong people in the jobs just because they have families to feed. I mean, we all have families to feed. But the overall good of the nation is what should determine who gets the job. And then just to tie tonight to the point I was making last night, I think it was last night, about agency, legal agency, and then there's no need for an opposition or any kind of accountability systems, because the intention is not actually to create governance in Indian country. The intention is to meet the federal minimal risk reduction. It's just an opinion. I know there's people out there would 100% disagree with me, but that's okay. So if the federal government wanted to do more than just meet its own agenda, manage the Indian problem, then the Indian Act could have been amended long ago to create a more democratic process, one that respected consensus building, one that respected clans, one that respected, models that we bring to the table as Indigenous people. And all that's there is the agency model, which is I'm contracting you to do what I want. That makes you my agent. And in this case, that makes you my Indian agent. So anyway, okay, good night.